Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Rainfall podcast. And today we're going to be talking about another of the races, and this time the Composites. So, we've gone through a lot of different races, and yet again, this is another race that has been created through experimentation by the preeminent. Now, these are a particularly tragic kind of a story in that instead of like other races, they were sort of genetically modified and all of that. Composites are humans who've had their brains extracted and torturously so, pulled out through horrible experiments that allowed the brain to remain completely alive and conscious throughout the entire process. And they've been placed inside of a container that is then wired up to a body, and this body is mostly sewn together from corpses and various animal parts and things like that, just sort of cobbled together to make some form of a semblance of a walking human. And so essentially, they are humans from before the world's end. They've been conscious this entire time. They were fully aware of the horrible experiments that transformed them into what they are. And most composites are pretty traumatized by this, as you would think anyone would from having their brain be extracted and them being aware of the whole process. Um, and so they essentially shamble around as these corpses um, that they have control over. And really, they don't actually have, regular speech and sight and senses like that. They have sensors that are implanted into their body nearby to their the container that holds their brain, which is implanted in their chest. And these sensors essentially give them some semblance of normal human senses. They have sort of a speaker that lets them make noises. It transfers their thoughts into active sounds like speaking. And they have sensors that take in light and images and transfer those directly to the brain, allowing them to see. Things like that. They basically have their senses directly wired up to their brain from external sensors that are implanted in their bodies. Um, and again, as they're made from corpses and various animal parts, they don't necessarily always match up. So, for example, they may have their hands from one person and their torso from another person, their legs from another person, and all just kind of stitched together into some mass that is vaguely human-like. And so they've been known to sometimes be slightly decaying as their corpses were whatever state they were in before they were sewn together, and after that, whatever state they were in is preserved and is unchanging. So if the corpse was decaying or falling apart, their body is forever going to look like that. So what about their culture? Well, like I said, for the most part, these creatures are very traumatized. They understand firsthand the horrors of the preeminent and what happened to the world because they lived through both the preeminent invasion and the experiments that turned them into composites. And so most of them have absolutely no desire to do anything but live their own lives. They're very reclusive, and they tend not to get involved with other people. They live their own quiet life away from other people and within the societies of other creatures. Because for the most part, composites don't really have their own lands. There's not really a big kingdom of composites somewhere. For the most part, they just live as they live quietly within other creatures' civilizations. However, there is one major exception to this, and this is the valley known as Khufu, where a bunch of composites have gotten together and attempt to really escape from the horrors of the world they find themselves in by creating this new little civilization based around ancient Egypt, and it is ruled over by its pharaoh, whom all of the composites living there treat as a sort of living god that they should all worship and obey, because essentially they're doing it as an escape mechanism, something that allows them to get away from the rest of the world and the horrors that they've experienced and that continue to lurk in the world, just by making something that's made up and going all in on it. But otherwise, those who live outside of Khufu and just live in other cultures, you see them often as sort of like respected elders in various cultures, because they are people who have immense knowledge of the world before. And so you can see them taking on positions as advisors to rulers, or as librarians or storytellers, things like that. Because their knowledge of the world before everything happened, and so you know, they use their knowledge and their memory to their advantage to make a living and to make a difference in the world. If they do want to do anything, composites generally want to just make the life that they see just a little bit better for other people. Now, their relationships to other races, most people kind of just don't even notice composites because they keep to themselves. So there might be composites, a composite living on a street somewhere, and for the most part, they just blend in with everyone else. They don't stand out, they don't try to make an impression or anything like that. They just want to live their lives. And again, those in Khufu, the ones who are slightly different and have made their own society, they're rather feared by other people. People think they're insane and crazy. And they've been known to kidnap people or to purchase slaves in order to build massive temples and structures within their lands. And so people are very afraid that just going near Khufu can lead to them being kidnapped and enslaved. And so people tend to just ignore them. And last, we're kind of going to talk about the religious beliefs of composites. And for most of them, they've kind of become atheists in that they saw the world be destroyed. They lived through these tortures and everything like that. And so for most of them, they stopped believing in anything when their former beliefs in God or whoever, no one came to save them. No one stepped in when the world was ended and when these horrible tortures happened. They just lost all faith, and they ended up just not believing in anything anymore. So that's about everything I have to talk about for the composites today. Fun fact, there's only 2 races left. So next week we will cover the last 2 races. And the first of those that we're going to hit are going to be the saplings. So if you liked this video, please subscribe, and that would mean a lot to me. And I will see you next time.